Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning we'll be in Numbers chapter 30, verse 1 through chapter 31, verse 54. Moses told the leaders of the tribes concerning the Israelites, "This is what the Lord has commanded. If a man makes a vow to the Lord or takes an oath of binding obligation on himself, he must not break his word, but must do whatever he has promised. If a young woman who is still living in her father's house makes a vow to the Lord or places herself under an obligation, and her father hears of her vow or the obligation to which she has pledged herself, and her father remains silent about her, then all her vows will stand, and every obligation to which she has pledged herself will stand. But if her father overrules her when he hears about it, then none of her vows or her obligations which she has pledged for herself will stand, and the Lord will release her from it, because her father overruled her. And if she marries a husband while under a vow, or has uttered anything impulsively by which she has pledged herself, and her husband hears about it, but remains silent about her when he hears about it, then her vows will stand, and her obligation which she has pledged for herself will stand. But if when her husband hears it, he overrules her, then he will nullify the vow she has taken, and whatever she uttered impulsively which she has pledged for herself, and the Lord will release her from it. But every vow of a widow or of a divorced woman which she has pledged for herself will remain intact. If she made the vow in her husband's house or put herself under obligation with an oath, and her husband heard about it, but remained silent about her, and did not overrule her, then all her vows will stand, and every obligation which she pledged for herself will stand. But if her husband clearly nullifies them when he hears them, then whatever she says by way of vows or obligations will not stand. Her husband has made them void, and the Lord will release her from them. Any vow or sworn obligation that would bring affliction to her or her husband can confirm or nullify. But if her husband remains completely silent about her from day to day, he thus confirms all her vows or all her obligations which she is under. He confirms them because he remained silent about when he heard them. But if he should nullify them after he has heard them, then he will bear her iniquity. These are the statutes that the Lord commanded Moses, relating to a man and his wife, and a father and his young daughter, who is still living in her father's house. The Lord spoke to Moses, "Exact vengeance for the Israelites on the Midianites. After that you will be gathered to your people." So Moses spoke to the people, "Arm men from among you for the war, to attack the Midianites and to execute the Lord's vengeance on Midian. You must send to the battle 1,000 men from every tribe, throughout all the tribes of Israel." So 1,000 from every tribe, 12,000 armed for battle in all, were provided out of the thousands of Israel. So Moses sent them to the war, 1,000 from every tribe, with Phinehas, son of Eleazar the priest, who was in charge of the holy articles and the signal trumpets. They fought against the Midianites, as the Lord commanded Moses, and they killed every male. They killed the kings of Midian, in addition to those slain, Evi, Rechem, Zur, Hur, and Reba, 5 Midianite kings. They also killed Balaam, son of Beor, with the sword. The Israelites took the women of Midian captive, along with their little ones, and took all their herds, all their flocks, and all their goods as plunder. They burned all their towns where they lived and all their encampments. They took all the plunder and all the spoils, both people and animals. They brought the captives and the spoils and the plunder to Moses, to Eleazar the priest, and to the Israelite community, to the camp on the plains of Moab along the Jordan River across from Jericho. Moses, Eleazar the priest, and the leaders of the community went out to meet them outside the camp. But Moses was furious with the officers of the army, the commanders over thousands and commanders over hundreds, who had come from service in the war. Moses said to them, "Have you allowed all the women to live? Look, these people, through the counsel of Balaam, caused the Israelites to act treacherously against the Lord in the matter of Peor, which resulted in the plague among the community of the Lord. Now therefore kill every boy and kill every woman who has had sexual intercourse with a man. But all the young women who have not had sexual intercourse with a man will be yours. Any of you who has killed anyone or touched any of the dead, remain outside the camp for 7 days. Purify yourselves and your captives on the 3rd day, and on the 7th day. You must purify each garment and everything that is made of skin, everything made of goat's hair, and everything made of wood. Then Eleazar the priest said to the men of war who had gone into the battle, "This is the ordinance of the law that the Lord commanded Moses. Only the gold, the silver, the bronze, the iron, the tin, and the lead, everything that may stand the fire, you are to pass through the fire, and it will be ceremonially clean. But it must still be purified with the water of purification. Anything that cannot withstand the fire, you must pass through the water. You must wash your clothes on the seventh day, and you will be ceremonially clean, and afterward you may enter the camp." Then the Lord spoke to Moses, "You and Eleazar the priest and all the family leaders of the community, take the sum of the plunder that was captured, both people and animals. Divide the plunder into 2 parts, one of those who took part in the war, who went out to battle, and the other for all the community. You must exact a tribute for the Lord from the fighting men who went out to battle, 1 life out of 500 from the people, the cattle, and from the donkeys and the sheep. You are to take it from their half share and give it to Eleazar the priest for a raised offering to the Lord. From the Israelites' half share, you are to take 1 portion out of 50 of the people, the cattle, the donkeys, and the sheep from every kind of animal, and you are to give them to the Levites who are responsible for the care of the Lord's tabernacle." So Moses and Eleazar the priest did as the Lord commanded Moses. The spoil that remained of the plunder which the fighting men had gathered was 675,000 sheep, 72,000 cattle, 61,000 donkeys, and 32,000 young women who had never had sexual intercourse with a man. The half portion of those who went to war numbered 337,500 sheep. The Lord's tribute from the sheep was 675. The cattle numbered 36,000. The Lord's tribute was 72. The donkeys were 30,500, of which the Lord's tribute was 61. The people were 16,000, of which the Lord's tribute was 32 people. So Moses gave the tribute, which was the Lord's raised offering, to Eleazar the priest, as the Lord commanded Moses. From the Israelites' half share that Moses had separated from the fighting men, there were 337,500 sheep, from the portion belonging to the community, 36,000 cattle, 30,500 donkeys, and 16,000 people. From the Israelites' share, Moses took 1 of every 50 people and animals and gave them to the Levites, who were responsible for the care of the Lord's tabernacle, just as the Lord commanded Moses. Then the officers who were over the thousands of the army, the commanders over thousands, and the commanders over hundreds approached Moses and said to him, "Your servants have taken a count of the men who were in the battle, who were under our authority, and not one is missing. So we have brought as an offering for the Lord what each man found: gold ornaments, armlets, bracelets, signet rings, earrings, and necklaces, to make atonement for ourselves before the Lord." Moses and Eleazar the priest took the gold from them, all of it in the form of ornaments, all the gold of the offerings they offered up to the Lord from the commanders of thousands and the commanders of hundreds weighed 16,750 shekels. Each soldier had taken plunder for himself. So Moses and Eleazar the priest received the gold from the commander of thousands and commanders of hundreds and brought it into the tent of meeting as a memorial for the Israelites before the Lord. So first off, you have the rules and regulations concerning oaths. That is, when a daughter in her father's house takes an oath, if her father hears it and doesn't say anything, then it stands. And if he says something regarding it, then it's annulled. And likewise for the wife, under the husband's authority, if she takes some oath, and the husband hears it and says nothing, then the oath stands. And if he says something about it, then the oath is annulled, and she's no longer under that oath. Then in Numbers chapter 31, you have this fight against Midian here, where in response to the matter of Peor, that is when Midian/Moab tempts Israel with sexual sin, and indeed succeeds in tempting them, and tempts them away to adultery/idolatry, and thus brings this curse upon Israel, where many of them die in a plague. So you have, in response here, this slaughter against Midian, where vengeance is commanded by the Lord against the Midianites. And so it's done. And spoil is subsequently distributed amongst Israel. Also, you have the issue of the commanders of the army bringing back all of these women, and it said that those who have had sexual intercourse with a man are to be slain. And this is because of the manner of the assault against Israel prior, which was essentially a weaponized sexual assault against Israel to get them to leave God and to instead worship the idols of Midian. Let's see here. Concerning chapter 30, he shall not break his word. A vow before God is no small thing. God expressly commanded that Israel should be careful to keep its vows and fulfill every oath made. In many circles today, the breaking of an oath is just standard business practice, but before God, it is simply sin. Some people today believe that vows or oaths are not permitted for a Christian today. They think this is because of what Jesus said in Matthew 5:34 through 37. But I say to you, do not swear at all, neither by heaven, for it is God's throne, nor by the earth, for it is his footstool, nor by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great king. Nor shall you swear by your head, because you cannot make one hair white or black. But let your yes be yes, and your no be no, for whatever is more than these is from the evil one. And you also have James 5:12, but above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by earth, neither by any other oath, but let your yes be yes, and your no be no, lest you fall into condemnation. But in the context of the rest of Scripture, we see that Jesus was not forbidding oaths, as much as telling us that we should be so filled with integrity in our words that an oath is unnecessary. Jesus answered under oath in a court, and God himself swears by oaths. Like in Hebrews 3:18. And to whom he swore he that they should not enter into his rest, but to them that believed not. From Hebrews 3:18 there. Because God takes our vows so seriously, sometimes it is better not to make a vow. When you make a vow to God, do not delay to pay it, for he has no pleasure in fools. Pay what you have vowed. It is better not to vow than to vow and not pay. From Ecclesiastes 5:4 and 5. Many vows are just plain foolish. I'll never do that again is a foolish vow, and it is foolish and unwise to demand such a vow from someone else. Of course, there is a vow we all can and should make, a vow to praise God. Vows made to you are binding upon me, O God. I will render praises unto you. So I will sing praise to your name forever, that I may daily perform my vows. From Psalm 61:8. Yeah, and of course you also have the marriage covenant, which is also a vow to embrace the one over every other. An unmarried woman's vow was not taken as binding unless approved of in some way by her head, that was her father, who had the right to overrule her. And likewise, a married woman's vow was not taken as binding unless ratified in some way by her husband, who had the right to overrule her. A widow or divorced woman had no male head of her household. Her head is God directly, so she is bound by her vows. if she vowed in her husband's house. If the husband confirmed his wife's vow, either specifically or by silence, then he was responsible to make sure that the vow was fulfilled. That is, he shall bear the guilt, her guilt. He shall bear her iniquity means he will suffer for the broken vow as though it were his. Yeah, the two are one flesh. Every vow and every binding oath to afflict her soul, her husband may confirm it or her husband may make it void. This is an outworking of the principle of headship. When God declares someone to be in a position of rightful authority, and others are expected to submit to that authority, the head also is accountable before God for the result. God never grants authority without accountability. When this is understood, it makes submission much easier. Yeah. And likewise for government and positions that is in a position of authority over us. It too has more accountability by being in that position. Take vengeance on the Midianites. The Midianites were a nomadic people, at this time associated with the people of Moab. God commanded they be attacked in retribution for their seduction of Israel into sexual immorality and idolatry. The Midianites were a large confederation of tribes associated with various smaller groups. They roamed through the arid lands of the Sinai, the Negeb, and Transjordan. Here it is those Midianites associated with Moab that are picked out for vengeance. Take vengeance. We are generally uncomfortable with the idea of vengeance because it doesn't seem consistent with God's love. Yet in the right context, vengeance is something good that God is interested in. The scriptures repeatedly speak of the vengeance of God as a positive thing. Evil comes when we take vengeance into our own hands. In this circumstance, Israel was in a unique place, with a special call to be an instrument of God's vengeance. This is something no person should take upon themselves today, knowing that ancient Israel had this unique place in God's plan. So when God ordained instruments of authority, such as government, take vengeance on evildoers, we as Christians can be at peace, knowing that good has been done when vengeance has been executed. Yeah. And I guess something that's just been floating around in my mind is like in the case of somebody who works at a nuclear power plant, for instance, and has proven themselves to be not only negligent in their work, but actively the opposite of beneficent, malevolent. They, if they're allowed to continue, can cause harm not only to themselves, not only to those in their company, but to the wider community and to the world as a whole. And if they aren't properly dealt with, can and will cause that harm. So there are places where vengeance is appropriate, as long as it is ordained by God. Yeah, so when God ordained instruments of authority, such as government, take vengeance on evildoers, we as Christians can be at peace, knowing that good has been done when vengeance has been executed. Yeah. Jesus said that government does not bear the sword for nothing. Afterward you shall be gathered. As it turned out, not immediately afterward, but afterward nonetheless, regarding Moses. He sent them to war with Phinehas, the son of Eleazar the priest, with the holy articles and the signal trumpets in his hand. Significantly, the priests went with the nation into this battle, and the priests went with the holy articles. And they warred against the Midianites. According to the custom of the day, all the males were killed, and the women and children were taken as servants, with all the possessions being taken as spoil. Balaam, the son of Beor, they also killed with the sword. Balaam, who had masterminded the strategy by which Israel would be seduced into sexual immorality and idolatry, and who did it all for money, was now dead. He was judged by the vengeance of God, and his money did him no good. This is the reason why Jude 1:11 speaks the error of Balaam for profit. It is just plain error to sell out God for money. You end up a loser every time. Balaam had longed, "Let me die the death of the righteous, and let my end be like his," from Numbers 23:10. But Balaam had no interest in living the life of the righteous, so he died the death of the sinner in the company of sinners. Moses said, "Have you kept the women alive?" Moses was angry because the children of Israel failed to see the great danger of sexual immorality and idolatry posed by these women who before led the men of Israel into these exact sins. Christians are often tripped up by things that were a threat, but they did not see them as a threat. Though most Israelites thought these women were safe, they were more dangerous to Israel than an army of mighty warriors. Israel could overcome mighty warriors if they were spiritually strong, but if they were seduced into immorality and idolatry, they would certainly fall. We often think of many things as dangerous to us as Christians: hostile government, secular humanism, academic attack, and so forth. But the things we accept in our midst as Christians that open the door to immorality and idolatry can do far more real damage than any of these other things. Therefore, all the women who had known a man intimately were to be killed, but ones who had not been connected with the immorality and idolatry of the Midianites could be kept alive. The principle guiding whether or not they were judged was whether or not they had sexual intercourse with a man. That is, that they were guilty of weaponizing sexuality against Israel. Every male among the little ones, these also had to be killed. This was harsh, but done with the understanding that in that ancient culture the boys would have grown into men with the solemn responsibility to avenge their father's death and to perpetuate Midianite culture, which in itself was anti-God. Purify every garment, everything made of leather, everything woven of goat's hair, and everything made of wood. As well, anything that had come into contact with the Midianites and the spoil taken from them had to be purified. Then it could be used. This is a valid principle for us to observe when Christians want to plunder things from the world and use them for the cause of the gospel, such as music, media, and other things. But some things cannot be cleansed and must be done away with. Other things can be cleansed and may be used by the people of God for the glory of God. I guess also, in thinking about this, what helps me is considering the course of history of what would have happened if Midian was allowed to simply continue as it was. To me, undoubtedly, Midian would have come against Israel again in the same way that was effective before. That is, with the sexual immorality and adultery. And could Israel stand many such attacks against it before being completely subsumed by the culture around it and adding in the pantheon of the Baals into a new Israelite pantheon? But God sought to have a people separate, apart for himself. And thus it was appropriate for God to exact vengeance upon Midian. Everything that can endure fire you shall put through the fire, and it shall be clean. All the material spoil had to either be purified by fire or cleansed with water. Only then was it fit for use by God among the people of God. And if Israel would have been dissolved, then where then would Messiah come from? And to me it seems as though the whole of God's salvific plan was threatened by this Midian. When God uses the fire of purification, we can say with Job, "When he has tested me, I shall come forth as gold." The fire purifies precious metal by causing the impurities, the dross, to rise to the top, where the refiner can skim them away. The refiner can tell when the gold is pure because he can see that. He can then see his reflection in the pool of gold. When God wants to wash us clean, he not only uses the water of baptism, but also the ministry of the word, as described in Ephesians 5:26, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word. Divide the plunder into two parts between those who took part in the war, who went out to battle, and all the congregation. Customarily, the spoil belonged to the soldiers alone, but God did not want soldiers who were looters or pirates, so he commanded that they also grant some of the spoil to the people of Israel who did not fight. All the gold of the offering that they offered to the Lord, a portion of the spoil also, was to be given to the Lord. Even with the spoils of war, God wanted Israel to have the heart of givers. Just checking Matthew Henry here. They slew all the males, that is, all they met with as far as they went. They put them all to the sword and gave no quarter. But they did not slay all the males of the nation, is certain. For we find the Midianites a powerful and formidable enemy to Israel in the days of Gideon. And they were the Midianites of this country, for they are reckoned with the children of the east. Yeah. I think an important part of understanding this narrative, too, is that you often have this exaggerated language when it comes to saying things like all, that all were slain. That is, it's not, as is so often levied against the Old Testament, a xenophobic, genocidal slaughter of a people group. But rather, it's the customary language of the time to say that they were slaughtered completely, when subsequently you have it revealed that they weren't slaughtered completely. Yeah. They slew the kings of Midian, the same that are called elders of Midian, and the dukes of Sihon. 5 of these princes are here named, one of whom is Zur, probably the same Zur whose daughter Cosbi was, from Numbers 25:15. They slew Balaam. Many conjectures there are as to what brought Balaam among the Midianites at this time. It is probable that the Midianites, having intelligence of the army of the march of this army of Israel against them, hired Balaam to come and assist them with his enchantments, that if he could not prevail to act offensively in their favor by cursing the armies of Israel, yet he might act defensively by blessing the country of Midian. Whatever was the occasion of his being there, God's overruling providence brought him thither, and there his just vengeance found him. Had he himself believed what he said of the happy state of Israel, he would not have herded thus with the enemies of Israel, but justly does he die the death of the wicked, though he pretended to desire that of the righteous, and go down slain to the pit with the uncircumcised, who rebelled thus against the convictions of his own conscience. The Midianites' wiles were Balaam's project. It was therefore just that he should perish with them. Now was his folly made manifest to all men, who foretold the fate of others, but foresaw not his own. Yeah. Going down to the end, I guess. God was to have a tribute out of it, as an acknowledgement of his sovereignty over them in general, and that he was their king to whom tribute was due, and particularly of his interest in this war and the gains of it, he having given them their success, and that the priests, the Lord's receivers, might have something added to the provision made for their maintenance. Note, whatever we have, God must have his dues out of it. And here, as before, the soldiers are favored above the rest of the congregation, for out of the people's share, God required 1 in 50, but out of the soldiers' share, only 1 in 500, because the people got theirs easily, without any peril or fatigue. The less opportunity we have of honoring God with our personal services, the more it is expected we should honor him with our substance. The tribute out of the soldiers' half was given to the priests, that out of the people's half was given to the Levites. For the priests were taken from among the Levites, as these soldiers from among the people, for special and hazardous service, and their pay was proportioned accordingly. Yeah. Anywho, thank you so much for joining me today. Hope you have a great day. Bye.